jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. You jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off.
Good evening and welcome. I'm John Caldera, president of the Independence Institute. You're watching Independent Thinking. Well, I thought it was time for you to meet my lawyer, since we're going to be talking about my lawsuits. So that ought to work. Richard Westfall with the Hale Friesen.
Hale Friesen Law Firm, yes.
Why don't law firms ever just get, good names like Super Duper Law Firm or, Lawsuits Are Us, or
I don't know. I think that's something we may go to in the not too distant future.
And from the State House, glad to have you here, Frank Minolti. You represent Highlands Ranch area.
I do, John. Thank you for allowing me to join you.
The reason I want to have you two gentlemen here, and particularly you, because I wanted to talk about this lawsuit that the Independence Institute spearheaded, along with a lot of terrific plaintiffs, that has declared the Bill Ritter property tax mill levy freeze unconstitutional. I want to get to that. And the reason we have Frank here is because there's some political aspects to this, but I want to make sure everybody knows, not only do we invite you, we invited Kerry Kennedy, who is the treasurer who took the other side of this, who was the brains behind what has now been found to be unconstitutional. She can't be with us, and I'll take her on face value with this. She's a good lady, and she's never taken away an invite from here. I wish the governor would come, but we've invited the governor to show after show after show, and unlike his predecessor when we would argue, he wouldn't be here. So thanks for coming.
You bet.
All right, let's explain this. Why don't you give us a little feedback on this? Refresh our memories. I remember last year, 2007, the governor sits on the west steps of the Capitol, surrounded by kids as theatrical props, and claims that we have passed something that includes the Children's Amendment. This was Senate Bill 199. Senate Bill 199 did something that sounded great. It would freeze our property tax mill levy, and really what it did was going to bring in lots of money. What really bothered me about this was two things. One, it didn't give a penny to kids. It gave all the money to the General Assembly, you guys, and you guys can spend it any way you want. Right. And furthermore, it raised taxes without asking. Give me a little bit of the background of this before we go to the lawsuit.
Sure. It was part of the School Finance Act last year where this unconstitutional change took place that amounted to a property tax increase on the people of the state of Colorado. And over and over and over again, a series of times in 2007, we came back, Republicans in the House and the Senate came back in 2008, making sure that we reminded folks that this property tax freeze was likely to be unconstitutional because of what the Attorney General told us in 2007.
Yeah, in 2007, when the Democrats proposed this was Kerry Kennedy's idea, the Attorney General, the highest lawyer of the land, came down and talked to all the legislature and to the governor. What did he say?
Told us it was unconstitutional, that it amounted to a change in tax policy that would result in revenues to the state that they would not otherwise have, and that it should go to a vote of the people. And we expressed that same opinion on the House floor, ran a series of amendments saying let's at least give the voters an opportunity to vote on this, as would be required by the Constitution when such a change takes place. They were rejected over and over again in committee on party line votes, on the floor on party line votes. And you raise an interesting point about the general fund, because I even ran an amendment at one point during the process that says, okay, if you say that this is about education, then let's lock this money up that the state is going to receive and make sure that we put it towards education. And oddly enough, that failed on a party line vote, with Republicans voting for it and Democrats voting against it. But that's sort of the dynamic we have.
That's what I loved about this bait and switch of the so-called Children's Amendment.
Yeah.
Senate Bill 199, which is causing massive tax increases depending on what school district you're in on your property, and it's for the kids. He was standing there with the kids, but it doesn't go to the kids. This year you had $118 million more that you could play with for the kids, for not the kids, for tourists, for roads, for prisons, for health care, for whatever you wanted to. It wasn't for the kids.
No.
Am I misrepresenting that at all?
You hit the nail on the head, and that's precisely the problem. And one of the reasons why this year the House Republican caucus and the Senate Republican caucus, on a series of bills that would come through, starting with something that is called the budget resolution early on in the year, said, let's set aside $118 million just in case this is found to be unconstitutional, just in case our Attorney General is actually right, which we thought he was from the outset. And that, too, was rejected on a party line vote after party line vote. And now we're in a situation where our House Republican colleagues and Senate Republican colleagues. Turns out we were right. Turns out the Attorney General is right. And now we're staring at a $118 million hole in the budget because the Democrats in the House and the Senate were unwilling to set that money aside just in case Republicans were right.
And the governor wants to continue to act as if this is constitutional. He said in the press that doesn't matter. I'm gonna budget as if this money is here.
Well, and that's the part that I find so strange. I've never found any plaintiff or defendant that would presume any outcome of the Supreme Court of the state of Colorado. But over and over again, the governor has come out, Governor Ritter has come out and said by himself with his spokespeople that he expects that the Supreme Court is going to overturn it. And I just don't know how he thinks that can be the case. It means one of either two things. One, the fix is in, and they know about it. Or two, it is a tremendously irresponsible act that I think is going to harm the school kids of the state of Colorado, is going to harm school districts across the state of Colorado, and the governor not having a plan on how the state is going to backfill this $118 million that's going to come out of school district budgets is tremendously irresponsible.
Now, let's bring it over here. Now, when Senate Bill 199 was passed, it was blatantly unconstitutional, said the Attorney General. I agreed with him. I called around and talked to a lot of different lawyers who wanted to take on this case, but this is not an easy case to take on, to show that a statute that was passed by the state legislature, that was signed into law by the governor, meets this burden of proof that it is unconstitutional. So far, you have been able to do so, representing folks from the Mesa County commissioners who signed on to this lawsuit, to Democrats and Republicans, homeowners and business owners as well, who've been affected by these massive tax increases. I guess, first of all, explain it as briefly as you can, and this can get complicated. How is this a tax increase? What is unconstitutional about freezing local mill levies?
Because there is a provision within the Constitution that specifically provides a limit on property taxes. And that very provision in the Constitution that limits the growth in amount of property taxes any district can take in a given year has been in place since Tabor, and it was enacted in the School Finance Act itself the following year because a major chunk of funding for K through 12 education is done by local property taxes. What happened was that the folks that passed Senate Bill 199 completely ignored that property tax revenue limit. They looked at some of these other elections that had been taking place in the school districts where they were called debrucing elections. These elections merely allowed school districts to keep revenues from whatever sources. They were never designed in any shape, size, or form to have any impact on property taxes. In fact, when we did when I did an open records request, when you first engaged me to take a look at this, did an open records request on all the school districts, I found a number of dozens of Tabor notices where if you look at them, it's very clear that it's to have no impact on property taxes.
So bring it to a level that even I can understand. Basically, the way this works is when a school district raises money from property taxes, when it doesn't get enough to run its budget, the state has to backfill.
That's correct.
Now, since property taxes go up, mill levies go down in order to keep the tax burden about the same. That's what our Constitution calls for.
Well, it allows for growth, but a growth that's limited by the population growth in school kids, percentage change in school kids, and inflation.
All right. And so
it does go up. It just doesn't go up maybe at the size that some people would like.
So when the mill levy goes down, when they freeze the mill levy, when the governor froze the mill levy, that sounded good, but most people didn't know that it was going to go down because property values were going up. So in Mesa County, for instance, they had 1 year increases of property values of nearly 32%. And since the rate couldn't go down, property taxes went up. Tell me about a couple of the plaintiffs there. Now, the county commissioners were upset about this.
Before we go on, can we talk about the magnitude just on Mesa County alone? This change in the School Finance Act, freezing the mill levy and increasing property taxes for most school districts in the state, if you look at Mesa County